Welcome, welcome, welcome to another episode of Cyrus's podcast. Today, I have my good friend, Lindsey Jaffe. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Can't wait.
I mean, I'm actually here. We're in your office. So, thank you for letting me be here, So this all started, the reason I wanted to interview you on the podcast is like, one, it's what you do now, where you're at. You've had a lot of success, but when we were in North Carolina, we had a really in-depth conversation about like your journey to get here, and I thought it was really cool and inspiring, and I wanted to share that. So like to start, rewind. I want to rewind to like basically, before you even started as any sort of professional in athletic, as an athletic director or anything like that. Like, what did you do before?
Yeah. So I, first and foremost, obviously appreciate you reaching out. I know it took about 4 months for me to agree to this, but just appreciate that. So a little bit about me and just the backstory is just one, I'm born and raised in Florida. And so now out in California, definitely interesting switch for me. But growing up, did the sport scene, no clue what and how that was going to transpire. My parents were not college athletes. They just, I think, thought that was in everyone's best interest for my family. And then chose soccer. Couldn't tell you the reason why.
It was just like, it just happened.
Organically, that's the route. They didn't force me any which way, which, I actually agree upon, even though I wish I was a basketball and a hooper, but, here nor there.
Well, you got the sneakers for it. So.
Yeah. The shoe game stayed. But so then soccer is how and why I got into the ultimate collegiate athletics. But
when did you decide? Like, I was just talking to one of my friends and we were talking about like when we decided to just play soccer, or like, when was that?
For me, it was like 13. Yeah, I started club at like 7.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, stupid. Not sure how, why. I mean, I went from YMCA to club, and looking back, that's just ridiculous. Yeah. But, and then I decided between basketball and soccer, and that was about 13. Florida, you can play all year round, so it's a bit different in terms of the soccer landscape and having that opportunity and not having to go indoors with the snow and stuff. So just decided soccer was it from like 13 until I went to college at 17.
So you were a young high school graduate.
Yeah, so I went to college at 17. My parents had to sign my paperwork the first day of college when you're in your welcome meeting, and they're like, "Who's 17?" Well, back then it was paper. Now it's a DocuSign, but how times have changed. But I had to like raise my hand, and I was like, my parents left.
Yeah. Like, what am I supposed to do?
So I like literally had to call and be like, yo, y'all need to turn around. Like I need you to sign my forms for the NCAA compliance paperwork. And so that's like, ultimately, I mean, I got to Appalachian State, went through the recruiting process, but I ultimately tore my ACL my junior year of high school. Yeah. So that obviously put a dent in my recruiting process. But I also got diagnosed with Crohn's the year before that.
Oh, wow.
So that's kind of like the whole rhyme and reason behind like how I think and do and act is just like, I think you grow from failure, period. Yeah. Like, that's not a failure. That wasn't like choices, but those are struggles that ultimately I had to figure out if I was going to overcome or just kind of seep in my sorrows.
100%. It's always like that thought process of like, so I'm literally obsessed with butterflies is because like, there's like, I believe that there's growth in that struggle, right? Like that, like butterflies go through physical pain to become these beautiful creatures. And sometimes we go through physical or emotional pain or both to like become the better version of ourselves. And it's like that metamorphosis that's like so powerful. So when you go through, and then it's that choice.
Oh, it's a choice. It's not like, even.
That's what it is, right?
Because I could have chosen to go left. Yeah. And not play soccer, give it up. Well, I could have done that when I got diagnosed with Crohn's. because that they took soccer away from me for a little bit.
Wow.
And I think you actually appreciate it more when they take something away from you. Then I got it really taken away from me because then I was out with injury, which is 9 months. But
how did you? I'm going off on a bunch of tangents, but like, how did you deal with that, like mentally?
Yeah, I think that's why I only trust so many, because I think I came out of it on my own. Like, just I believe I'm just a mentally tough individual. Maybe genetics, innate. I don't really know, but a lot of people don't go through things like that. Like, no one in my family had ever had a disease or like torn their ligament or been knocked down to the point of like needing to figure out a way to come back up. I definitely was a fortunate individual in terms of just societal nature and norms. Was
like your parents, or your parents that way, or like I'm curious because like I'm a big believer in like we like learn how to act from like things around us, you know, and it's like, or was there a coach that like influenced that, or was it just like you just chose and you're like, I'm not giving up?
I think it was to prove everyone wrong, and I think that comes from the Crohn's, because no one could figure out why I was sick. Like, I couldn't run a mile, like I would like faint, and like, but I would still try to run the mile, and most people would just be like, this is ridiculous. And then I went to like 8 different doctors, and it was just like, nothing's wrong with your daughter. So then my parents were like, maybe she's just mental, right? Like,
well, that's
and I went, and then they sent me to the psychologist, and I'm like, I'm not mental. Like, there's something wrong with me. Like, I don't freaking know what's wrong with me, but no doctor could prove it. And so that, I think the course of that and the questioning of like, maybe there's pressure from your family to play soccer. I'm like, no, like I could quit. Like, no, I don't
like, it was actually no pressure whatsoever.
And then I think over the course of that, like, doubtful nature, and then like no one knowing what was going on. So there's always like, this kid is just like faking.
Oh, wow.
And I wasn't faking it.
Yeah, exactly.
When I got diagnosed, I was 4 days away from surgery. And so that there was something wrong.
Yeah, but exactly.
Obviously, intestinally and inside your body, it's sometimes hard to figure out. So I think like ultimately I just wanted to solve for myself. And knew I could, and just it's just a matter of how and why. And that's, I think, where I chose to really take on a life of proving people wrong and doing the hard right, and just always taking the most challenging path forward. Doesn't mean it's always like the easiest, but I think that ultimately is where everything stemmed from, is getting diagnosed with Crohn's, and then it really was a long process, which ultimately is why I think I'm wired the way I am. Yeah,
that's interesting. And so then you got diagnosed with Crohn's, and then you had your ACL?
Yeah, like, so I got diagnosed with Crohn's, then I tore my ACL, and then I separated my shoulder in a period of like 11 or 12 months.
Wait, and how old were you at this point?
This was like 15 was Crohn's, 16 was my ACL, and then I went to college at 17.
Wow. So
it was a lot, like a crazy lead up to going to college. So I really wasn't prepared as I entered college. It was just like I had just gotten cleared from my ACL like that summer before.
Yeah, especially like going from high school level to like going to go play college, like that's one, just a mental battle in itself, but then coming back from all of that's insane. That's a lot.
Yeah, so my freshman year was mad tricky, but also perseverance through the situation you're dealt. But I wouldn't change my college experience for the world. I appreciate the human beings that were put in my life at that point, but ultimately why I'm in this chair at USC is because of my athletic director at App.
Oh, wow.
That's the only connection into this whole thing, because no one in my family understood college athletics, nor did I, truthfully. And my brother and dad are both lawyers. My mom's a psychologist. The only thing I said was, I'm not going to be any of that.
I know what I don't want to
be. And so when I got to college, it was like, I really thought about being a coach and a teacher, inner city. No idea how I even got there. Just sounded great in the moment. Ultimately saw coaching, some here nor there, some not great mentors in that space, and that's part of my collegiate situation. I had 3 coaches, and this is all like a really weird, crazy story that most people don't go through. But like my freshman year, my coach, the summer after, he ended up getting suspended or let go for raping one of my teammates.
Oh my gosh.
So then we went through that, and I was a freshman, but I had to take care of the incoming freshman.
Wow.
And it was just a really crazy, spiraled out of control situation where the man was still around secretly, and like, you just grow up really quickly when you 100%. Don't have the ability not to. And so I started just hiding them from the situation because they didn't need to know what was going down. And so that was my freshman year. We had an interim, and then that was a struggle in itself. She was young, but amazing. One of my really good friends now, because age gaps like turn out to be so interesting.
Like, so weird, yeah. I actually think about that all the time. It's like, it feels like it's so far apart, but it's like, so she actually works at Georgia in the business office, but she was our coach at like 23 or 4 as the interim. But that's a tough situation with coming out of what we went through. And then we finally got a new coach, and there's matches and there's not matches, and that's totally okay. And I try to allow for kids to understand that now, like, you might not enjoy, like, it just might not be a good match. Yeah, exactly.
And that's okay. Like, but it's how you come and accept the challenge and change.
100%.
And you don't have to just leave. Like, you are always going to have humans in your life that are going to upset you or spin things off in a cultural way that you don't agree with, but you can run from it, or you can lean into it and figure out how you're going to best service yourself and the outcome. And like I said, my experience as a college athlete, it was something I would pay to go back to. Like, I would go on the line tomorrow if I could. Like, instead of
I say that all the time,
sitting in the chair. Like,
I say that all the time. Like, gosh, the gratitude that I have to have had the opportunity to do what I did is just like,
and I don't.
You don't realize it sometimes until like you're way out of it.
Oh my God! When I was on the line, I was like, "Get me off this line!" Like, I don't want to run anymore. But ultimately, I would literally pay to go back and be with my teammates and live that experience over again. But during that time, I got to have the opportunity to intern for my athletic director, because I just walked in and I was like, I'm just super like bored. I just need to figure out some stimulation. He's like, oh, we love free help. That would be like illegal now. And he's like, of
can't do that now.
He's like, of course. Like, and at the time, App was going through a feasibility study. Everything was D1 minus football was Division I AA. They had just won 3 national championships. And so he's like, just let's put this spreadsheet together, examine it to Conference USA, Sunbelt, like, see where we match up financially, like, lose money, gain, make money, whatever, or maybe we'll stay neutral. And that's when he's like, what are you doing with your life? And I'm like, your guess is as good as mine.
And what did you study?
I was a psych major.
Okay.
Happenstance. Which I actually appreciate, because learning human behavior is a critical component of even to my job today.
I literally tell any person that asks me, oh, I'm going to college, I don't know what I want to study, I'm like, marketing or psych. Like, those are like the 2 that you could pretty much use in like any job.
Yeah, so I ended up studying psych, but I did not want to be a psych. Yeah. Like, I did not want to be a psychologist, which I feel like I'm a psychologist every freaking day of my life right now. So it's funny, like, as my story turns out, like, I ended up going to collegiate athletics, and back then internships is the only way through. And so I did a couple stints at UNC Greensboro, and then my parents were like, what are you doing with your life? Yeah. And I'm like, LOL, I have no idea. I have no income. I'm going to grad school at the same time.
So you went from like being an intern where you were at.
Yeah.
And while you were in college still, or okay.
Yeah, so I was an intern during my college career.
Okay.
And then when I asked my AD, like, what do you need to have? He's like, you at least have to have an upper level degree. It doesn't matter like what it is. Which is not true now, but it kind of is true a little bit.
Yeah.
You just get, it doesn't like,
you just need something. Yeah.
Yeah. For why? I don't really know, but here nor there. I did that, got that. While I was doing that, I was an intern at Greensboro, and then my parents literally picked up the phone after 4 months. Like, you have no income. Like, you want a loan, or you want to come home? And I'm like, I don't want a loan. Like, I've worked way too hard to do this. So I ended up just moving home, and I emailed FAU at the time and just said, do you need help, like, just to stay in the game? And so then I started working at FAU that summer, and both internships ended up being in compliance. I lasted 1 week in marketing. I am not a t-shirt thrower. I do not smile enough for that space. So that's why the story is funny, because compliance is like the most similar to a lawyer.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh my God.
You studied psych, and now you're
I'm in like reading bylaws, and which is just comical. And then at FAU, my boss, when I was an intern at Greensboro, was like, yo, you got to come to this convention. I'm like, nah, like, I just freaking like got home, and he's like, you have to come, like, just book your flight, and I'll pick you up at the airport, and you can stay with me, like, really minimal cost to you. Like,
what was the convention?
So it was called Regional Rules. It still exists today. Okay. It's one through the NCAA, and at that time it was like really, really big. Yeah. And all the leaders in compliance always went. Yeah. So he's like, yo, I'll just take you to the bars, like, I'll connect you with all the people I know. And I was like, man, that took me a long time to decide. Yeah. I ultimately went, and I was cool for about 48 hours. Yeah. And I went to the bar, and I introduced myself to people, and spent a lot of time with various constituents. And 4 months later, I ended up getting a job offer at Cincinnati, and it was in compliance and kind of just in sport specific compliance. And I was like, I don't even care. I don't even know where Cincinnati is. Like, I'm leaving. So didn't even look at this out. I just was out. Like, oh wow. Yeah, I went on my interview, but I got the paperwork on the spot, and I was like, all right, I'm not even calling my parents. I'll just sign the paperwork, and we'll move forward and drive to Cincinnati, which is in Ohio, and had to look that up on the map. A little jaded, I guess, but yeah, 2012, I started at Cincinnati, drew a couple straws in the office. I got financial aid, student housing. If you know anything, that's just like the really, really shitty parts of college athletics, because there's always an issue. Yeah. But ultimately, I'm so grateful for getting the short straw. And from there, I just kind of took on different roles, and at smaller schools you get so much flexibility and autonomy. And so then I went into like student services and created my own student services group and financial literacy program in-house, and started working in football and sport administration, and just built this whole little shop.
Do you think that like all of those little things that you did are helping you now because you understand?
Oh yeah, I'm so thankful that I had a hand in almost every aspect. So I had international services, international admissions. I had the financial literacy program, so I did FAFSA, loans. Like, so when someone says something, I'm not an expert in anything. But I've had a time in my career that I had opportunities to dive into it. And I have a type A personality. And so when I dove into anything, I looked at it pretty in depth. And so it will never leave me. But now I don't look at the NCAA rules anymore. I say go to the compliance office. It is the one area, but it's like I know the rules to an extent now, but I know everything enough that if even a coach asks a question, I'm like, oh, I had an experience in that. Or, oh, I roster managed, or, oh, I know how to, break down equivalencies to be the most effective for a sport.
I'm curious because like a lot of people, or some people, I mean, at least will like get an opportunity and then like they'll be there and they'll be like, this isn't what I wanted. Like, so during this whole time, like let's say even just at Cincinnati, like was it everything you dreamed of that you wanted?
No, never. You'll never be I firmly believe you'll never have like the perfect role. I stayed at Cincinnati for 8 years and that's a really long time. And especially back then, I think still to this day, there's a lot of job hopping in collegiate athletics. I think it's becoming a little bit more stagnant in terms of people staying just because such a unique landscape today. But back then, I literally said I was going to be there 2 years. I didn't even sign up for the health benefits to where you could like be in the Cincinnati system or Ohio system because I was like, there's no way I'm going to be here. I mean, you just don't know. Like life is so crazy. I mean, ultimately I met my husband and like, that's why I stayed. So good, lucky Cincinnati that I met Nick, but, cause I definitely like had no goal to be there longer than 2 years. And I like told my parents like 2 years. And they're like, okay.
And Nick comes around.
And they're like, oh shit, this kid, our daughter's a lost cause. But, but in the moment it's like making the most of it. And that's what I did. And I don't always do that. Like regardless of what your job description is, it doesn't mean you can't do additional duties as assigned. Period. If it was moving water to help with facilities and ops because the stadium was opening the next day and we had a game and like we literally just needed water being moved to the concessions. Like there's so many things and opportunities and you learn from moving water. That's just like, you always got to be grateful for the opportunities that are presented to you, and I'll always stand on serving and giving back. And I mean, I only can give my time. I'll always tell people that is like, no, if I get an email for a request to speak, or I might take 4 months to get it done, but the only thing I can give people is my time. That's the only thing I can give always.
I think like just knowing, you know, your background and knowing all this, but like just knowing you in the professional like aspect, it's like it's always coming from a place of like leading from service versus like, you know, some people are like, I lead from the front, like where I feel like leading from the back or leading from the like understanding like you have no issue, you know, again, what is it like the saying, like cleaning someone's feet, you know, like if it comes down to like, is this the betterment for like the bigger picture? And I think like just analyzing like kind of where it's coming from is like, you didn't have the easiest route going into college athletics. Then you went into college athletics. Then it was like, what the hell? And then you were trying to figure out really what you wanted to do this whole time. And then you started realizing like, this makes sense because that's that time, right? Like you went thinking you're going to be there for 2 years and then you ended up being there for 8 years. And like, when did it like, I mean, or has it, right? Like hit that it was like, I enjoy this and I want to continue doing this.
Yeah, it was from day one when I started. I knew that I could forge my path. I didn't know it was I had no idea what that path was going to look like. But from like day one, I knew that I saw the chair, the AD chair, and I was like, like fascinating.
Yeah.
That's something North Star. And based on everything I had gone through, I'm like, seems like a solid challenge.
Yeah.
You didn't see a lot of women doing it specifically back then. There was a couple.
Yeah.
More now, still not that many, but to me, it was like, who cares?
Yeah.
I've always had like this attitude of just like, let's just see what you can achieve.
Why not? Yeah.
Doesn't mean you're always going to get there. And I'm okay with that too. And that I think that's the acceptance of like, you're not always going to get there. And like,
I think that's also like so relieving too, like to like, in my opinion, like, cause when you make a big goal, you think like, you know, some people will look at it, oh, if I don't reach it by this time, then I'm a failure. And it's like, no, like, can we just make like little progress on a daily basis that like, hey, maybe we do get there eventually. And if we don't, it's okay because I've enjoyed it along the way, you know, like.
And I think having that understanding and like acceptance piece is, I think, why I'm cool. Like, I'm good. Even if I didn't come to USC, like, I came to USC because I saw it as an opportunity.
Yeah.
I saw it as another challenge. I saw it as an ability to get out of compliance and then serve people at a higher level. Because compliance, you're still stuck in the really the minute like bylaws and making really critical decisions in that space. But sport administration as a whole is you get to grow coaches and mentor coaches.
Yeah.
And also grow and mentor student athletes, which is definitely a passion. I've always had to give back in the student athlete. Someone gave to me, right? Like an AD gave to me an opportunity. If I can continue generationally changing kids' lives, ultimately they change our lives.
Yeah, 100%.
They're the ones who make decisions ultimately as we age, and if we can prepare them for life after college, that's a success.
Yeah, the younger generation period is the generation that it's our future. So it's like at the end of the day, it's 100%. And then also like, just like, I think it's so cool to be able to like grow, you know, like I always say, like, I love building things. And I like, how cool is it that you get to like help build like people? Like, it's just so cool to be able to like positively impact people, to like get them from point A to point B. Like, that's the coolest thing in the world, like, in my opinion.
And so I came out here, which this was never moving to California, which is another whole thing. Like, drew a map. This was not on the radar. It was.
So when I ask you what's next, I'm going to say what's never happening, because that'll probably be the thing.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, so California was a big red we were like, no. And then I'm like, yes. Well, that's life. I mean, like, I'll always say, like, you got to understand that change is how you're actually going to make waves in your future. And being uncomfortable, I got really comfortable at Cincinnati. I could do things like, I could make a phone call, and it was just like, moving water. And so this populated, and truthfully, you just never know in collegiate athletics if jobs are real or something's internal. And so I did have obviously the opportunity. I knew the AD that moved out here from Cincinnati, and I just hit him up, and I was like, is this job even real? And he's like, oh, you're interested? And I was like, yeah, I think it would be awesome. Like, it would be able to allow me to take the next step out, to actually get out of compliance. And that's hard to get out of compliance.
Yeah.
I never had the dream of running a compliance shop, but always opportunity. There's always areas that will make your life better, and I'll always appreciate coming out of that shop. But I needed to get out, and this allowed some crazy opportunity to have 10 teams, which is insane, but I always look at it as an amazing and grateful opportunity, because I have 8 head coaches. I've got to be a lead in 4 or 5 of those hires at this point.
Yeah.
And there's no one way, like, and this is where the human behavior and understanding emotional intelligence. And I was telling this to a kid the other day, is like, not any of my programs operate the same way.
Yeah.
And that's not wrong.
It's not a bad thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so just because you like observe from afar one team doing it this way, like it doesn't mean it translates to another leader.
100%.
And it doesn't mean that one leader is good and one leader is bad. It's just, I can't walk into one head coach meeting and have that same meeting with another head coach, because they're two different people.
Yeah, 100%.
And then you have teams, and they're just their dynamics are so different. And so I think that's what USC afforded me. And like I said, I'll always be grateful for coming out here, is now this new opportunity to always lean into the student athlete experience. But I think I changed a little bit as I got out here to spend a lot of quality time on focusing on coaches and growing coaches. Because I think, how does a coach become a coach?
Yeah.
Just become an adult student athlete. There's not, you go through your training, and I get all that.
No, but it's the same thing. It's like, what I was going to say is like, it's the same thing. Like, I always talk about is like, who trains parents to be parents? Like we growing up, right? Like, as little kids, we look at our parents like they're superheroes, but they're just trying to figure out life. Mm-hmm. And they're like trying to figure out how to take care of us as like as, you know, and they could read books, they could do this, but they've never gone through that, right? Like it's the same thing as coaches. It's like you know, it's really an interesting thing. Like any job, to be honest, like when you step into it, it's like, who trains you? You know, like you're trying to figure it out. We're all trying to figure it out at the same time.
Yeah. And so I kind of switched because I thought if coaches could be operating as their best selves, the trickle down effect into the student athlete experience comes out. And so then it should be a full circle system. Yeah. And so I've really leaned into just figuring out blind spots and really leaning into that coach professional development series. Yeah. And I take that into the assistant coaches as well and allow for them to have a monthly session just for connection and growth. But that's what I really have kind of shifted here a lot is organizational health within each of my teams, taking risks on hires, but knowing that I was going to invest my time and energy into their culture shifts and their culture building systems. But also always know that like no one's perfect. Yeah. And accepting of that, but leaning into figuring out how you can be better every single year. Yeah. And being open and honest in the communication that I'm not just going to sit here and not tell you like critical feedback.
Yeah, exactly.
And so a lot of my coaches know, like, I'm not going to sugarcoat things and that's to the betterment of them.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's two lines of communication. They get to do it for me too.
Correct. Yeah. And it's like I was talking to somebody else about this as well. Is like, it's different if I come and I sit there and I'm like, hey, Lindsey, XYZ, boom, 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 because you know I'm coming from a place of love and care and respect to get you to the next level. It'd be different if it's like someone random saying the same exact things, right? Like I think like that level of like respect that you have for the coaches and the coaches have for you is what actually like gets you to be able to like have those rough conversations that are like, they're good.
And right? I pride myself on relationships and building that. And because ultimately, like, feedback is king. Yeah. Period. Like, it does not matter if you like what you're getting told or not. Yep. Like, if you don't get feedback in the positive and negative, you'll never maximize your 100%. Potential. And so all my coaches, I love that. Yeah. All of my coaches want to maximize their potential here. And they all have the same goal. Yep. It's not a foreign concept here. Yeah. They want to win championships, every single one of them. Yep. And every single one of them has really great traits. And then we always have the areas of growth. And that's the everyday is focusing on what we do really well. And then also then honing in on everything we're not. And how, from an organizational structure, can I lean in and help them problem solve their 100%. Way out of that? Because usually it's their blind spots. Yeah.
Well, but I also love that it's necessary for positive and negative feedback, right? Like it's like you need to know what you're doing great, and also you need to know what you're not doing great. And sometimes what you're not doing great is what you need to know more.
100%.
Right? But if you can't receive that and accept it, it's hard. But like also like I think it's very interesting because some leaders, I go back to like the analogy of parenting because, you know, it's something that we all like have been through growing up, but you know, you have the parent that like lets their kid do whatever they want and it wants to be the best friend, and that most of the time hurts the kid long term, right? Where it's like but you have the strict parent that's like, hey, look, this is what we want, this is, you know, but they have respect for each other. Like that's how you have growth. Like it's very interesting that style of leadership, and I think it's really powerful because like that's where you're coming from in the fact of like, hey, look, I'm going to give you the positive feedback, but I'm also going to give you the negative feedback because I know this is what you need to be able to grow. I can't just be your best friend.
Yeah. I've taken the word negative out of my repertoire because there's always, it's not even negative anymore. It's just an opportunity and an area of growth, period. It's student athlete feedback is area of growth. My own feedback to you is just areas of growth. Like, I just think words are heavy and words are important, and But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's all about the initial relationship that you're building. And if you don't have that, then it's going to actually be physically impossible to maximize the entire program's success. And that's why I switched my focus, because, okay, if I lean in really hard on the student athlete experience, I'm going to really miss the mark on the overarching success of each of my programs, because my coaches are so critical in that process. And so I lean into feedback. It's helpful when students are honest, which is tricky. You're always breaking barriers there too. But my programs who have been the most honest is the ones that I've seen the most success in. And so that's what's been so fun being out here, is seeing change in a lot of my programs for the betterment, and knowing that my student athlete experience is really garnering and getting better. It might not be at the pace students want. That's always a tricky battle when you have a lot of change. But if I can see the success build, and I think I said this here in North Carolina, is just like, it's brick by brick always.
That's it.
And when you get new leadership, you either choose to lean into it and the change, or you get disgruntled and you kind of are really hard to manage. And it becomes a push, like a tug and pull, or whatever the analogy is. But that's the constant I'm working in now, because I just had a lot of change in coaches the last couple of years, and it's riding the wave and making it through the waves a lot of times in those situations. But if you have good people and they know and can hear growth and see growth and take in feedback, like, that's the coaches that end up being the most successful.
100%. I love that. So now, what was the question? Where are you never gonna go? Because right now, right, you're associate athletic director here at USC. Like you have, I think, like, amazing leadership skills. I think you've had an amazing story. Like what are do you eventually want to be an athletic director, and run a full shop, or like what do you want next?
Yeah, some days I'm like, man, I have the best gig in the world, because ultimately, like, the success of the people that I've gotten to work with, specifically like a GM of each of these teams, is actually really fun. Even in the really bad times of some of it, like, it's really fun to oversee and manage a program. But ultimately, there's always more, and there's always something else that, like, is so intriguing, that's, like, far in the distance. I ultimately still today, like, think I want to be an athletic director, but the ultimate landscape is so tricky right now, and so I don't really want to stay, like, dialed into that, because I always want to make sure I'm positioning myself for what could be next. But I always think, like, the AD chair is definitely intriguing. Because that's your leadership and your trickle down of how you believe things should be ran, and that's just, like, autonomy at its finest. And I'm good at being lonely, and leadership's lonely, and giving to others is lonely. But I think, like, I'm really good at that. And giving and giving and giving, and not really receiving a lot, which a lot of people aren't. So I think I could, like, actually be okay with that chair. But, like, currently I always wonder, like, what is next? I truly have no idea right now. Especially, like, given my husband doesn't even live in California anymore. It's made it a little interesting on answering that question today versus maybe, like, last year. Because that's, like, such an interesting space to sit in. But right now it's just being in the moment, fulfilling my obligations to my coaches, but also figuring out and positioning kind of the what's next. But that's also just growing as a human now. I think is where I'm focused the most in this new cycle, is just how can I continue to pour into myself as much as I'm pouring into everyone else's leadership, and how can I keep upping my understanding of professional development for myself, so that ultimately that's the trickle down of me to my coaches to the student athletes.
100%.
But I think that's like my next cycle is just like continuing that part, because once you make it to that next chair of leadership, you have to be really good at it, because that's the ultimate culture that trickles down into your department.
And it's also like just breaking it down to even like the simplest stuff. Like you can't continue to pour into other people's cups from your cup if your cup isn't getting filled up. Like you're gonna run out, right? So like it's so important. That's the biggest thing in my life. It's always like you gotta pour into yourself so that you can continue to pour into others. So I love that. I appreciate you being on today. Thank you so much.
No, 4 months delayed is okay.
It's not bad, right?
My book is it's okay.
I have one last question. A piece of advice that you would give to someone that is going through a challenge, like an injury, or like you went through a diagnosis of like going through a big challenge in their sports career, like what's a piece of advice to keep them going?
Yeah, I think it's control the controllables and being in the moment. Because every day in those moments, like you could be going and think you're going to therapy and like getting real therapy, and you're bawling, crying because your knee hurts. Yeah, and you're like, oh, I'm such a baby, and that happened, and it's like, man, I thought it was tough. Yeah, and then the next day you're like, fine. Yeah, and like therapy's great. Yeah. So if you live in like prediction, and like the what ifs, it's going to be really hard. And so I think it's just being in the moment, being present, and accepting the stage that you're in, if that's recovery, if it's rehab, if whatever it may be, that the next day you wake up and your eyes are open. Yeah. Like, don't take that for granted, right? Because some people eyes might not 100%. Open. Yep. And that was something that was taught over the summer, is just like, even like close your eyes for 10 seconds and be in the moment and try to open them and like really like act as if you can't. Yeah. And you check yourself a little. We take so many things for granted. And I think just taking a breath and being a little bit more in the moment a lot of times when things aren't going your way, I think would be helpful from an advice standpoint. Because I mean, every day is such a blessing, no matter how your day ends up going, because a lot of people might not wake up. Yeah, that's amazing. Gratitude and focus on the little wins on a daily basis. Love Definitely. That. Thank you. Thank you so much for actually making it happen. I appreciate you. You're my second podcast. I think I'm going to create my own podcast. Yeah, you might as well. You're awesome. Appreciate you. Thank you. Of course.